So welcome to this session. We're going to be focusing on community responses to the AIDS targets, and we're going to hear from perspectives from around the globe. And you'll see that we're going to have 3 different panel sessions. The first, we're going to hear a global perspective, and then we're going to hear some country case examples. And in the third session, we're going to give an opportunity to ask questions of how people have found trying to operationalize some of these advocacy activities. And to make it engaging, we're also going to do an online tool, but that's actually going to be on another platform. So this is going to cause a little bit of challenges, but we'll see how we go. People can multitask, perhaps. So if we can go into the Mentimeter activity. So people who have not done it, this is another platform. We'll be using it throughout today's session just to try and get your perspectives on the topics of interest. This will also be a mechanism for you to give questions and answers. So what you do is this is a different QR code. It's not the same on here, so that's going to be a bit confusing for many people. Some cameras don't take you automatically to a URL code or a link, so you have to just type it into your browser, and the browser direction is www.menti.com. From this, we will also get an output, so we'll see how many people were there as evidence. And then it'll ask you for a code, and that code you need to put in is 21724106. And when you get on, just press the little thumbs up. You'll see in the bottom right corner, it lets us know how many people have registered. And you'll see there's also a little Q&A little icon. So there's an opportunity for you to ask questions throughout the session. So great, that's looking like lots of thumbs up. We only have 6 people. My maths is not great, but I think we're far off the target. So we'll give people a few more minutes. If you're having an IT problem getting on, please raise your hand. I can't help you, but at least we'll know who's having problems. There might be other people in the room who could assist. The other Sandput members who are in the room, they're all familiar with Mentimeter, right? So perhaps if they can just see if people are having any challenges to help them log on. We've got okay. So we've got 11 people. So then I think we're going to start. Just to get a sense of who's here, what we would like you to do now is on this interactive app, just move the little blue dot to what country you are either based or you're from or you identify with, and then press submit, just to get a sense of the geographical spread of the people who are taking part. So you can see we've got a couple of people from the Global South. We've got someone from Sweden. Wonderful.
No, it's supposed to be.
This is also a geography test, so.
I didn't have my glasses.
Okay. Brexit or not?
I'm Swedish.
Yeah, fantastic. I sometimes end up in Antarctica, so it's also the tech. We've got a few people from East Africa, someone from, I suppose that's North Mozambique. Anyone else who hasn't joined, please? We've got 11 people. Great. We've got someone from, I think that's Indonesia. Give people a few more minutes. So for people who have not started, if you can take the cursor to the bottom left, not the arrow. Not the arrow. Yeah, move a little bit to the right. A little bit to the right. Yeah, and then over the QR code, hover and click there. Yeah, so that's the QR code if people have just joined. And then if you can't get on with your phone, that's the code that you need. Okay. That was an icebreaker because now we're getting into the important quiz stuff. And this is not anonymous, so we can score you. No, I'm joking. It's totally anonymous. Okay, can we move on? We've got a few more people registered. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next question. 21724106. You could put in the wrong code, but then you'll be answering completely different questions, which is fine. Oh, great. We've got someone from Canada. We've got someone from Mexico. We've got people from West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana. Wonderful. So you can see we're getting some perspectives from different parts of the world. So now, we won't make any assumptions, but there has been this important event called the high-level meeting on HIV/AIDS a couple years ago. And there were some important targets that were made, and they're around ending AIDS by 2025, some of the targets. So we would like you to be able to rate your understanding of your knowledge of these targets. So if you have never heard of it, you're probably closer to 0. If you are training around them and advocating for them, we would hope it to be closer towards the 10. And you can see they're linked to a political declaration, and there's also the UNAIDS strategy. For people who don't know what UNAIDS is, that's the Joint United Nations Program on HIV and AIDS. So we can see 15 people have voted. You can see from the trend we've got a few people who've never heard of them before. We've got a few experts, and the bulk of people have some kind of idea. So with that introduction, we're going to start the session. We have an apology from Gloria Billy from UNAIDS. She was unable to attend, who is going to give an overview of what these targets are, why they're important from the UNAIDS perspective. But importantly, probably more importantly, we're going to hear from the community's perspective, from the International Network of People Who Use Drugs, about what are these targets, why they're important. And so I'm just going to introduce Aditya Taslim, who is the Advocacy Officer of Input. He identifies as someone who uses drugs. He's been living with HIV for 20 years, and he was involved in some of the first services in Indonesia. And in his little narrative, he says initially he had to keep his needles hidden to distribute to his peers, give people safer injecting advice, and keep out of the attention of the police, not to be arrested. But now he's working in a very important place, engaging on global level platforms like UNAIDS, the UN agencies and Global Fund, and really to try and ensure that these global targets get translated into community language and actions. Handing over to you.
How do I navigate this? Is that with the clicker?
The clicker is only for the Mentimeter, right?
Oh, for everything.
For everything.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity. My name is Aditya. With the International Network of People Who Use Drugs, we're based in London, but I'm from Indonesia, and I've been a drug user for 25 years. And let's see, right. So for many years, drug policies around the world have always been fueled with the idea of a drug-free world. Prohibition, moralism, lies, and social control have been in the heart of any drug-related interventions that we know. And war on drugs is a war on people. It's killing our community and affecting people around us. In 2021, it was quite a historical year in the AIDS movement because it was for the first time that the global community agreed on global targets on decriminalizing drug use. The adoption of the 2021-2026 Global AIDS Strategy and also the 2021 Political Declaration on HIV and AIDS included important opportunities to advance our decriminalization agenda and also to strengthen community-led responses and expand and scale up of harm reduction service coverage. However, having these targets at the global level does not necessarily mean immediate change at the community level. And the situation that our community faces on a day-to-day basis is still the same. We are still being criminalized, we are still being punished, we are socially excluded, stigmatized, discriminated against, and we're not seeing these important targets being included into the national strategy, nor that we are hearing these targets being discussed at national dialogue spaces. So I'm going to go over some of the key global AIDS targets briefly and the progress since 2021, because note that this was supposed to be covered by UNAIDS. Unfortunately, they're unable to attend in person, so it was my initiative to add a few slides into this. So these are the 10-10-10 targets. So if you probably heard the 10-10-10, but what is the 10-10-10? So basically, the three main targets, and we will be focusing on the first 10, which include less than 10% countries have punitive legal and policy environments that restrict or limits access to services. And from these targets, there are sub-targets under the first 10, and these are the sub-targets. If you look at the Global AIDS Strategy, and it will include the first sub-target is that less than 10% countries criminalize sex work, possession of small amount of drugs, same-sex sexual behavior, and HIV transmission, exposure, and non-disclosure by 2025. And as I said, this is historical because we've never had this target at the global level before. And the other important target is the 80-60-30, or people always mix it with 30-60-80 or 30-80-60, so it doesn't matter. But basically, this is a target that aims to strengthen community-led responses in the AIDS response, but not only to strengthen, but also to ensure that investment goes to community-led. But the question is, who is community-led, right? Like, there are many organizations that claim that they are community-led, but they're not really led by people from the community. They're not led by drug users. They're not led by key populations. So that's something that we need to, that hopefully in this panel later, we will discuss that more. So this is where we are. So in terms of harm reduction targets, and please, I'm not here speaking on behalf of UNAIDS, but this is just what I took from their report. So we have harm reduction targets. We have 50% coverage of opioid agonist therapy, and we are far from that. We are far from that. And this is 2023. Target is 2025. So we have 2 more years. And 90% coverage of needle syringe program, and only 12 countries of 28 reporting countries achieve 90% targets on coverage. And note that UNAIDS countries over 100 is, I think, 160 something. So there are only 28 countries reporting, and from that 28, only 12 actually have achieved. So we are also far from that. And these are the 10-10-10 progress. You see that the blue color here in the chart, the bar chart, is countries that claim to have decriminalized, while the orange is the ones that they still criminalize. But still, please note that even those countries who claim to have decriminalized possession of small amount of drugs, they still impose high fines, exorbitant fines, administrative sanctions, and many others. Even diversion to rehabilitation center, they're still coerced. It's still mandatory. So it's in a way that it's not really decriminalization. I will talk more about the decrim a bit later. And for the 30, 60, 80, we don't have tools to measure it at the moment. So we don't know how much money goes to community-led responses. And UNAIDS is still working on this, and this is an ongoing work that we hope that this year can be finalized and can be put in practice starting next year. We'll be able to get the data in the next year report. All right, so this is my presentation. So realizing the gap between the global spaces and national actions, Input published 2 key documents that aim to translate high-level documents such as the Global AIDS Strategy and the Political Declaration to simple and community-friendly briefs. And these are the briefs. It's available on our website. And the briefs provide the opportunity to our community to build their awareness and also understanding of the development at the global level. And this is important because we know that languages that are used at the global level are often a completely different language that we use at the community level. They also include recommendations that can be used at the community level to hold our governments accountable. So they're quite practical. There are some steps that what communities can do for a particular part of the political declaration, and then you can always use that as your advocacy points. And we also realize that there is a growing misconception on what so-called progress on decriminalizing drug use. Input conducted an assessment report on the impact of the current models of decriminalization on people who use drugs. It provides in-depth analysis based on the realities experienced by our community. The shift away from criminalizing responses and towards more public health-oriented approaches is said to be a sign of progress. But one might rightly question the extent to which a shift from criminalizing people to pathologizing them as patients can really be classified as a progress. And too often, decriminalization is discussed as if there is only one model. And this leads to a view that decriminalization anywhere equals progress. But despite the challenges, the opportunities to take urgent and transformative action to rectify this unacceptable situation are there. Last year, Input developed this training module. It's a drug user-led technical assistance module, Our Rights, Everybody's Rights module, aiming at building the capacity of drug user-led networks in using the global AIDS targets, particularly the 10-10-10 and the 30-80-60, and linking them with international human rights obligations and treaties in their advocacy. Furthermore, we also developed our first community-friendly legal assessment tools specifically designed and focused on people who use drugs, these tools are hoped to provide the basis of our advocacy in fighting for our rights to health, rights to freedom from torture, rights to bodily autonomy, and rights to liberation. Today, we have a great lineup of speakers at this panel who will discuss and share their experience in their advocacy and, more importantly, in holding our governments accountable for their commitments and promises. And let me close with a statement taken from the Vancouver Declaration. We are people who use drugs from around the world. We are people who have been marginalized and discriminated against. We have been killed, harmed unnecessarily, put in jail, depicted as evil, and stereotyped and dangerous and disposable. And now it's time to raise our voices as citizens, establish our rights, and reclaim the rights to be our own spokespersons, striving for self-representation and self-empowerment. Ultimately, the most profound needs to establish such a network arises from the fact that no group of oppressed people ever attain liberation without the involvement of those directly affected by this oppression. Through collective action, we will fight to change existing local, national, regional, and international drug laws and formulate evidence-based drug policy that respects people's human rights and dignity instead of one fueled on moralism, stereotypes, and lies. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd like to now switch over to the Mentimeter, and can I call up the next group of people? That's Ido and Adi and Shanae, just to come and join, please. So now we'd like to test your comprehension. So we heard that there are the 10-10-10 targets. We'd want you to now write on your Mentimeter. Can you, IT person? Can you just bring up the QR code again, please? Bottom left, yes. So for people who didn't join us, there's the QR code and the question. So we want you to just give us one of those perspectives. You shouldn't have to log on again. It'll already be on your phone if you used it already. So what are the focal areas? Is it around climate change? Is it around traffic signals? And then we'll see what people come up with. So let's see. Health, that's very broad. Okay. Anything else more particular? That one of the 10s or each of the 10s on? Punitive policies, great. Harm reduction, criminalization is an example of a punitive policy. Okay. Human rights. Anyone else? I'm checking the people who have trained before. Come on. Come on. Okay, access. Okay. So a reminder, the 10-10-10, one of them is around stigma and discrimination, one of them is around violence, and one of them is around punitive laws and policies. These are really important things for us to know and internalize so we can ensure they're in our strategic plans and at your local level plans, etc., so that they cascade down. So please go home and remember the 10-10-10. Now, the 30-60-80. What does the 80 stand for? You should be able to choose one. Is it the proportion of programs to support the achievement of societal enablers to be delivered by community-led organizations? Or is it the testing and treatment services should be done by community-led organizations? Or the proportion of HIV prevention services that should be delivered by community-led organizations? Okay. We have to do more training. So you can take a photo and you'll see these documents, so you can also go back and read them. So just to remind you, I get a bit confused, but the 30 aspect relates to the amount of testing and treatment. I'm not going to get it wrong. The 60 is around the the amount of programs or activities relating to the social enablers, and the 80% is the amount of HIV prevention. So needle and syringe services, PrEP, all of those things are part of comprehensive prevention, which we really want more community-led responses to be done. So if you have any questions, you should be able to write them. In the bottom right corner, you'll see there's a little dialogue box. You should be able to put that if you have any questions that you want to ask. Can I ask you just to take a few seconds and reflect when you hear community translation of policy, when you hear the global AIDS targets, when you hear Indonesia, Nigeria, South Africa, people use drugs, what are these core things that you would like to learn more about? And just jot those down so that when we come to the panel, if they're not covered, you can ask those questions. So just give you a second to think of a question that you would like to ask. These are actually images from the Train the Trainer that was done at this hotel a couple of months ago. Okay. And then before we start with our people who I'm going to introduce, can you just let us know from your perspective, either your country or your district or even your region, what is the most important drug policy issue for you that you want addressed? And then you can put, this is a QR Mentimeter activity. So you can put in your one on. So decrim is coming up as one. It's not a requirement for you to make that as your policy priority. Maybe there's something else. Okay, there's an emerging theme. There aren't bots. Okay, so human rights violations are also an important thing for some people. And often those are linked to criminalization. Financing, I think, has come up quite a lot also as an issue, and we're aware of how important those are. But you can see from the size of the words in the word cloud, that's how many people are providing this response. Okay. So with that introduction, we would just like to recognize we've got 3 fantastic people that are joining us from diverse parts of the world. They are all advocates that come from the community of people who use drugs. So the first person is Edo Augustin, and he's from the Indonesian Network of People Who Use Drugs, and he has received many honors, including a Red Ribbon Award for Advocacy and Human Rights, as well as Rolling Stone Awards at the Harm Reduction Conference. So please come over and give us an overview of the advocacy roadmap and environmental scan of the laws that you did in Indonesia. Can we welcome him with a round of applause? Do you have a presentation?
Oh, this one. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, my presentation today is about building an advocacy roadmap and using the legal environment scan, the toolkit that provided by International Network of People Who Use Drugs. Okay. As a community of people who use drugs, majority of our problem usually when we want to do some advocacy, for example, for legal advocacy and the policy, and also the environment that support for people who use drugs. But mostly of us in our region and also in Indonesia, at the beginning we don't really knows what we have to do, what we have to prepare, what kind of step, what kind of strategy, and who is the target and everything. Because most of us doesn't really know how to do proper or the best way to advocate the issues that we are facing in the country. So with the toolkit from the International Network of People Who Use Drugs, the legal environment scan, we feel that this toolkit really help us in developing recommendation for law and policy reform to remove barriers to access the essential HIV services for people who use drugs, as well as to the harm reduction and related health services. So the toolkit, the legal environment scan, focus in 3 areas, which is the first is the comprehensive harm reduction, and the second is societal enablers, and the third is the community-led responses. This is I took it from the toolkit. This is about all the steps that we plan for and strategize for our strategy. First step is about the planning and preparation, about the desk review, and the collection of the secondary data, and about reporting, and then how to maintain and sustaining the process. So we realized this legal environment scan, it's an opportunity for us to identify and examine key legal, policy, and human rights issues which is affecting people who use drugs in the context of HIV, broader health, and social justice. And also, this last, also as an opportunity to us to identify international human rights obligations by which countries are bound to hold governments accountable for upholding those obligations, and then to raise awareness of and generate national dialogue on the priority legal and human rights issue affecting people who use drugs. And the last is determine the extent to which the current legal framework protects rights or acts as a barrier to access to social legal health services by people who use drugs. So we use the legal environment scan to make recommendation for reforming laws, in the process of to reforming the laws and the policies, and addressing the practices that prevent people who use drugs from accessing health and social services. This is including harm reduction services, and also informed advocacy for reforming laws and policies and addressing practices that prevent people who use drugs from accessing HIV-related health services, including harm reduction services. So this is how we use the finding in the legal environment scan, using that in the advocacy effort in Indonesia. So, what have been the barriers and challenges in using the advocacy roadmap and legal environment scans? As we know, the advocacy roadmap, okay, the sequences of action and activities that will move things from where you are now, current situation, to where you want to be, and the change you want to see. So what was difficult in the process is sometimes it's very difficult to changing policymakers' perspective. For example, in Indonesia, everything, every policy, every law, they always relate that to the moral obligation, moral values, and also about religious value. So it is difficult for us to convince them about scientific or based on scientific or evidence based, and then increase the quality of harm reduction services. So in the last few years, harm reduction in Indonesia only focus the indicators of the services only about needles, and they forgot about the other components of harm reduction. So this is a little bit an example from us when PKNI, my organization, become a national sub-recipient for Global Fund. Only us who put all the 9 indicators of harm reduction as the achievement indicators and in the process. And unfortunately, they're not continue it until now. So basically, I don't know about what happened in your country, but in Indonesia, the indicators, it's only about numbers. It's not about quality. And other barriers is to monitor the criminal justice system implementation for people who use drugs. So the key points, one of the priorities and key point is as a network, as a people who use drugs, what we can do is to unite and then to make change together. Thank you.
I'm sorry to have rushed you. We have lots of perspectives, so I won't spend lots of time on introductions. Please, Anedi, he's from Nigeria, chairperson of the Drug Harm Reduction Advocacy Network, also is on a national harm reduction technical working group, engaged in Global Fund platforms, and is from West Africa.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, and it's exciting to be here. It's my first time in the Drug Policy Week. So we'll be talking generally about the technical assistance provided by Input. I won't fail to mention Input, and also Aditya. All the energy is spent in making sure that this happens. Let's go. Okay. All right. Okay, so this is the background. We had 2 technical assistance supports from Input on our rights, everybody's rights. And the funding was from UNAIDS, the Robert Carr Foundation, and the Love Alliance. Basically, it was aimed at promoting and advancing the community-led decriminalization agenda regarding people who use drugs and work towards addressing the punitive legal and policy environments that lead to the denial or limitation of access to services, and also build technical capacity of people who use drugs to advocate for decriminalization and drug law reform for a more enabling environment for people who use drugs, for access to health and social services and well-being. Okay, so this is what it took. We recognize that sometimes what we feel strongly about as activists might not generally be what every other person feels. So it was an inclusive process. We had 20 drug user activists. We could have had more, but for funding restrictions. We also felt that we should have someone from the government witness this and also make inputs, because we wanted to build something that would be acceptable to them also, that we can use, to advocate with them. And the technical capacity we built was on the impact of criminalization, drug use, and human rights, the global AIDS strategy, and the political declaration. And at the end of it, we developed a 5-year roadmap for decriminalization by, attendees of that program. This is the workshop pictures, few of it. So, this is the process of developing the legal environment scan. We developed the legal environment scan apart from also developing the advocacy roadmap. The legal environment scan was led and conducted by the Nigerian drug user community with support from Youth Rights Nigeria. We felt we should be as inclusive as possible. So since Youth Rights works on issues of drug use, we also invited Youth Rights to support us in this. We had introductory meeting with members of the drug user community, stakeholders from across Nigeria. We had a stakeholders briefing at the National Technical Working Group. Why we did this was because we wanted buy-in of stakeholders. The National Technical Working Group on Harm Reduction in Nigeria is a multi-sectorial stakeholders forum. Includes law enforcement, it includes people who use drugs, includes governments and academia and lots of other people. Okay, so after that, we did a DEX review of the laws on drugs and anything that affects drug use, including the Criminal Justice Acts. And then we had key informants interview in each of the 6 geopolitical zones. Nigeria is divided into 6 geopolitical zones. And so we had key informant interviews with drug user activists and people working on harm reduction. We also had focal group discussion with 10 drug user community members because we wanted to get the perspective of the people we are actually advocating for. We are privileged to, be those who are at the top, talking for those who I would want to say are at the bottom, those on the streets. And so we needed to hear their voices. And so we chose the states of Gombe, Oyo, Abia, Imo, Anambra, Ebonyi, Plateau, the Federal Capital, Kano, and Lagos. Some of the documents we used in developing the legal and policy scan included the Political Declaration on HIV/AIDS 2021, Global AIDS Strategy 2021 to 2026, the International Guidelines on Human Rights and Drug Policy 2019, the UN's 2025 AIDS targets, the African Union Plan of Action on Drug Control 2019 to 2023, the National Drug Control Master Plan for Nigeria 2021 to 2025, and the NDLEA Acts, Cap N30 of 1989, which was developed after the 1988 Drug Control Convention, and the Nigerian Constitution and other strategic plans and acts, including the AIDS National Strategic Framework and others. So we came out with these 2 documents, one, the Advocacy Roadmap, and the Legal Environment Scan. These reports are available. Okay, these are the outputs. So what we did, we developed an advocacy plan. We identified the barriers to the achievements of the 10-10-10 and 80-60-30. We identified the stakeholders that we needed to advocate with, and we also identified opportunities for engagement with the stakeholders. These are the advocacy priorities we identified: decriminalization, integrated harm reduction services, and representation at decision-making spaces. What have been the successes? We've used this to advocate for integration of viral hepatitis, opioid substitution treatment, and CLM into HIV for drug users in the GC7, and thanks to Colin for the support. And then we went ahead. One of the things we identified was that we needed to be, as a network, be members of the IDPC. Right now we are members of the IDPC. We started the drug user community dialogue in Nigeria to talk about the effects of criminalization. And then also because we felt we needed a platform where people who use drugs and other people can go get information on the activities of the local drug user movement, we established the key population hubs. It's online and on social media too. Okay. And then representation. Between then, yeah, we, okay, so from when we developed that, we've achieved this. We've been included in the strategic knowledge management of the National Technical Working Group in Nigeria. We identified that as something we needed to achieve. We've been included in the National Technical Working Group Committee on Decriminalization. We push for that. And we also push for a committee on socioeconomic empowerment of people who use drugs, especially for people who use drugs on the street. We are also pushing for community distribution of naloxone, and we hope in the GC7 that will come to pass because we've included as a priority. We've also been accepted into the National Prevention Technical Working Group for the first time. We got that status 2 months ago. And the National Aid Spending Assessment was also extended to the drug user community. The barriers and challenges, of course, insufficient funds for engagement with the National Assembly because, they want big places, big hotels, yeah. And then most of the stakeholders lack understanding of what harm reduction is basically about, and then discrimination of people who use drugs and people who use drug movement. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Shanae Roberts, who's going to be presenting on the South African experience. Shanae started off as an advocacy linkage officer and has advanced to become the National Advocacy and Regional Coordinator, passionate around issues affecting women who use drugs. Over to you, Shanae.
Thank you.
If you need to change.
Yeah. Okay, so today I will be speaking about my experience with the Our Rights, Everyone's Rights Technical Assistance Program. So on the 27th to the 30th of July, SANPUT, in collaboration with the International Network of People Who Use Drugs, funded the Our Rights, Everyone's Rights Drug Policy and Harm Reduction Technical Assistance Program. The training was attended by 14 participants, ranging from multiple stakeholders across South Africa, from harm reduction centers, healthcare providers, and networks. Okay. So the goal and the outcomes achieved. The goal of the program was to promote and advance the community-led decriminalization agenda for people who use drugs. It addressed the punitive, legal, and policy environments that resulted in the denial or limitation of services for people who use drugs, and increased the knowledge and capacity of community-led networks across the globe, across the new global HIV and harm reduction targets, community-led responses, human rights, and legal reform. Outcomes that were achieved in attending this workshop was that participants gained a better understanding of the extent of decriminalization for the possession, use, and cultivation of small amounts of drugs globally, and the impact of criminalization on health and human rights for people who use drugs. They too were given access to data on the impact of criminalization for use in the advocacy and gained a better understanding of why it's important to familiarize yourself with data on various impacts of criminalization for the purpose of the advocacy. Okay, so what happened? Participants were divided in 3 groups and were asked to prioritize the fundamental advocacy issues and 3 related advocacy objectives. Specific activities guided participants through relevant policy content, declarations, and targets over the course of 4 days. The workshop included discussions on the national, regional, and instrumental landscapes of drug policy and criminalization, as well as the impact of drug users. Collaborative projects enable participants to put their new knowledge to use in developing advocacy plans, which were presented on the final day. On the second day, advocates of sex work decriminalization joined the workshop, providing an overview of their approach challenges and experiences with sex work decriminalization in South Africa. On the third day, the team visited a harm reduction outreach site where members of TB HIV care were doing needle and syringe exchanges with beneficiaries, and this further enabled insights to advocacy and planning. So what was learned? We looked at the type of human rights violations experienced by people who use drugs, and human rights violations that were called into question were freedom of arbitrary arrest and detention, protection from torture and other forms of cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, freedom of association. We looked at various definitions such as depenalization, decriminalization, and legalization. We looked at the impact of criminalization on drug use for people who use drugs and how to approach advocacy issues practically by using SMART technique and the 9 pillars of advocacy. We also looked at monitoring, evaluating, and learning framework of advocacy plan and how to draft an advocacy roadmap. So here we were all busy putting together the advocacy roadmap. So what is an advocacy roadmap? An advocacy roadmap is a roadmap to address advocacy issues related to global targets, decriminalization, and harm reduction in South Africa. The roadmap is intended to help networks and organizations to address the challenges at the national and local levels, empower community groups, and challenge government as duty bearers ultimately. It's intended to ensure that people who use drugs, their families and communities can realize their human rights and achieve health. The overall objective goal is to enable people who use drugs to have a greater human rights protection, reduce vulnerability, increase access to harm reduction and comprehensive health services in South Africa by 2027. Okay, so the priorities, issues identified were the consequences of the decriminalization of drug use and the need for full decriminalization, the limited access to harm reduction services, particularly for women who use drugs, human rights violations experienced by people who use drugs, by policies and law enforcement, including violence and the confiscation of personal belongings, injecting equipment, and medication. Advocacy objectives. To move towards the decriminalization of drug use, a position of small amounts for personal use in South Africa by 2027, to advocate for the achievement of the global AIDS strategy on harm reduction targets for people who use drugs in South Africa by 2025, and to ensure that less than 10% of people who use drugs experience stigma and discrimination at community healthcare services by 2025. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. So we'd like to now open it up for a few questions for our panelists. I think we have some, you can just speak loudly if you can raise your hands. And we'd like to get maybe a question for each of them from our global perspective, West Africa, Southeast Asia, and South Africa.
So my question is for Ido. Thank you all for amazing presentations at the speed of light. It was really interesting to see what has been the response from the Indonesian government in terms of this advocacy roadmap that you have now? Or has there been any engagement?
Can you use the mic, Ido?
With Indonesian government, we have a lot of engagement with Indonesian government. For example, PKNI. I give an example. For example, PKNI was involved in the development of the guideline for hepatitis C testing and treatment. So basically, I think it's the first government's document which included logo from civil society in the document. And in others, for another examples, we we have been doing community-led monitoring since 2012, I think. Yeah, 12 at the end. And the first community-led monitoring we did was monitoring for the quality of harm reduction program in Indonesia. And also in 2015, there was a community-based drug dependence treatment, which is supported by Global Fund. At the time, Global Fund wants to stop funding it, and then we, as a national network of people use drug, doing also community-led monitoring, and the result we using the document of the community-led monitoring to advocate the Global Fund to keep funding the community-based drug dependence treatment, and also. With the monitoring of the quality of harm reduction, now GLM it's included in the Global Fund as one of big activity, and also if you know paralegal, the paralegal in the Global Fund proposal, I think in 2014 and 15, we came to Tanzania, I think Tanput and Kenya to give them conduct training for our friend in Tanzania and Kenya for doing a peer paralegal. Basically to give them knowledge about how to give legal assistance, start from first contact with the police and then after, continue to the trial process.
Greg, can I ask that we end it there? It's great to hear the diversity of engagements in Indonesia,
Yeah.
so that we can open it up to another question to maybe one of the other panelists. Sikona?
Okay. People use drugs often experience stigma and discrimination, limited access to healthcare, and violence. The challenges particularly affect women who use drugs. People use drugs are at risk of and fear of incarceration. And many people who use drugs have been in prison, which has had a negative psychological and social and economical impact on their lives. And also, with the punitive approach on drugs in South Africa, this approach creates criminals. Thank you.
So by decriminalizing, we'd address many of those issues. Thank you. Yes.
Good day. Thank you so much for all your presentations. Based on what Channel and Sanskrit has been doing in terms of bringing that, in terms of the studies from working with Sisonge and others, I didn't see that part. You have not similar in your countries in terms of learning from example, Sisonge and others coming in sharing in terms of their experience. Do you have similar things in your country?
So can I phrase that to Nigeria? So it's around sex work, decrim, or other key populations that face that are affected by criminalization. Have there been intersectionalities, engagements? What lessons have you learned?
Okay, yeah. After the presentation yesterday on the decriminalization of the process of decriminalization of sex work, I met with the presenter in the lift, and one of the things that stood out for me was the socioeconomic impact assessment, and it's one of the lessons we are going to take back to Nigeria, because I think that is something we didn't think of. Providing a socioeconomic impact assessment of decriminalization of drug use, and I think it's powerful. And then linking that with what HRI is doing about comparing the cost between criminalization and decriminalization. I think that is one of the key takes I'll take from this. Thank you.
So it sounds like there's an intention to learn more from other movements. So any question to the global perspective from input? Yes, please. There's no mic.
So Thank you, and thank you for the presenters for their presentations. They're really interesting. My question is to Aditya, since there hasn't been question posed to you. I think my question would be closely linked to intersectionality, but I just wanted to know what are those global advocacy strategies that are being implemented globally to kind of connect KPs in the same struggle around decrim, because at the end of the day, sex work, LGBTI, drug use, there's all that connection. What are those strategies that are there at a global level to connect the work so that we don't work in silos? Thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that question. I think it's very important because this is also one of the things that not just Input, but also other global key population network, NSWP, Impact Global Action, and GATE, who represent the 4 key populations, have been really pushing, particularly UNAIDS, in ensuring that the data that countries are reporting are actually reflecting the situation on the ground. Because sometimes numbers that are reported in the global AIDS update or report, they don't necessarily tell us a story, what's happening on the ground. Like, a number of countries have decriminalized sex work, but really, are they really the most accurate reference? And countries, as I mentioned, there are a number of countries that claim to have decriminalized drug use, but there are still sanctions. People are getting exorbitant fines. The people are getting administrative sanctions. People are being sent to rehab mandatorily. And these, kind of realities that needs to be brought up to the global level, and also making sure that when they present data, they also present the realities. And we need to be able to really understand what do we mean by decriminalization. If you look at my document that I shared, it explains that for Input, our perspective on decrim is that we want full decriminalization without any sanctions. And that's, I think, resonates to other key population networks as well, that we need to be very clear about what we mean by decrim, and we need to push for that. And we're working closely with UNAIDS to ensure that when countries are reporting, because it's their accountability mechanism towards the political declaration, and we want to make sure that the indicators included in the global AIDS monitoring and it reflects, try to be more, try to be as accurate as possible. I know that it's impossible work to have those indicators, but we work together to make sure that we are on the same page on when we talk about decrim.
Great, thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? So great to hear at the global level, there's collaboration and consultation across those global networks, which I think we can learn at the local level. There's at the global level accountability by those global networks that I think we can also learn. So I'm going to call up the next panelists to join their seats. And in the interim, we've got a question for the group. Don't know if anyone else recently joined us, but if you did, the panelists who are meant to come up, can you please join us? You know who you are? Do I need to call you up by name? Rita, Juma, Klaas? You can come and have a seat. Okay. Sorry, I've just gone ahead. People have already gotten their definition. So we'd like to know, if you haven't voted yet, what is your understanding of the definition of the decriminalization of drugs? There are 3 options there. So the options are: it's the process by which drug possession, cultivation, production, trade become legal activities? Or is it the process that involves the removal of criminal penalties for drug-related activities? Or is it the reduction in the severity rather than the removal of criminal penalties for drug-related activities? There's a lot of terminology in being able to advocate of what we want, and I think that's one of the things that Adisha highlighted, is that we have to be very clear what we're asking for and understand the difference between the different models. And you can see here we're having a mixed perspective of what decriminalization is. And now we're going to hear a little bit more about a Train the Trainer that built a little bit on people's understanding of decriminalization. So we've got, again, 4 fantastic panelists from a range of contexts, from Tanzania, from Nigeria, from South Africa, and from Kenya. They're all human rights and advocates, and they come from the community of people who use drugs. And we're going to have an open panel discussion. But just to frame the session, we're going to ask Rita Gatonye to say a few words, who is also the coordinator of an organization called Women in Response to HIV, AIDS, and Drug Addiction, who works particularly around issues affecting women. But please, over to you, Rita. Your presentation will come up, and then you just press the green if you want to change. Press the green.
Does he have it?
Yes.
Thank you.
You just got it.
All I need. So good, is it afternoon?
Yes.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rita Gatonye. Thank you for the introduction, Andrew. And I'm just going to frame what the wonderful work that has been happening in terms of increasing the capacities of drug users to advocate. So we're talking about a training that was organized by Input and delivered by a very able Andrew here, called Our Rights, Everybody's Rights. It is based on a technical assistance module that was developed, was it last year? Sometime last year. And we had one training. We had a training. Oh, wait, there's a nice picture first there for you all to see. You know, you don't have enough slides. You just put things that will send the message home. So, yes, know your audience. So we had a training in Kenya. This is really just frames what we're talking about. Just decriminalize poverty, decriminalize survival, and all the things that we do in order to do that are then criminalized. So we had a training in Kenya on this, Our Rights, Everybody's Rights, technical assistance. And then this year, the idea came to now gather people who use drugs from all over the world to now have a global training of trainers. So we had people from the Middle East, we had people from North Africa, Latin America, a lot of people from Africa, which was amazing, and we had people from Europe as well. And the first agenda was to just build that relationship between drug user activists and advocates all over the world, which is something that Input is very, very good at doing, and setting the environment for the learning that was going to take place. So just an overview of how we did it, how we first had reflections on previous workshops and trainings and how people who use drugs have been engaged in the past, what has worked, what has not worked, where are we leaving behind people who use drugs when it comes to advocacy for our own lives, what is it that we could be doing different, and we had a very practical discussion around that. Is it the process that we're using? Is it that we're not looking at the outcomes properly? And then we also discussed drug use as a human rights issue. Just, of course, to remind ourselves, we all know it's a human rights issue, but how do we apply the existing human rights laws to our legal and policy context? We talked about the bold new targets, which I think is the hardest part for anyone to remember. It's just numbers. But we've got the notes, so we can always go back. We talked about them and how we can use them going forward, and I think a bit later I'll mention how we used it in the Kenyan context with the Global Fund writing process that just ended. So we had now the actual practical training on how to train, which is always nice. But this was a lot different because the trainer himself just taught by example. So I learned so much more from what Andrew did than what Andrew said. Yes, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing. So we talked about different sort of facilitation styles, skills, and the different sort of considerations, the physical, psychological, and drug use reality considerations that should be put into place when engaging with people who use drugs. If you want an effective outcome. We had lots of fun little things in there. We did the speed geek, where as opposed to having all the experts come into one room and talk. So we had a speed geek with Guna, we had Monica on the other side, in the other room. It's very engaging, very fun, and different ways of learning. So that was another very nice gem. We learned how to design a training program. My colleagues have spoken about also developing advocacy roadmaps. We all did that for each of our countries, and then we came back and compared our situations, and also looked for paths of collaboration.
We talked about, of course, do we need to advocate or do we need to be activists? When do we shout? When do we stay quiet? Just the general things that we all know, but those are in a very practical context. So I think that's very necessary for every person who uses drugs to have. These are just, again, more pictures to fill in the slide space. Nice one. It says, people aren't against you, they're for themselves. Just another advocacy tidbit. So the training basically was about building competence, capacity, confidence, and community. So, well, it sounds cliche, C's. I see we like alliteration at this conference. So competence is now just being able to arrange people in a way that makes the most impact. Different ranges of skills at the same table, different ranges of expertise at the same table, so that you have that at the end of the day. Is that time? Okay. No, that's fine. That speaks for itself. And just to finish up on what that training was like, this is just a random picture I think we took on the street. And yes. Oh, is it a wine shop? I didn't see that. Whew, I did not see that. Yeah, we probably had some wine already. Yes, thank you, Sanpud. So the point of this is that literally the magic is in the moment. It's in the corridor advocacy, it's in the smoke breaks, it's in the pictures outside the wine shop, it's in the relationships that are built and the knowledge that is shared even outside of the conference slides, seats area. So, and this is I'm just showing off the beautiful drug user advocates that we had. Yes. And yeah, so looking forward to having more of a conversation around that, Andrew. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm just gonna briefly introduce yourselves, but maybe introduce yourselves by name, just very, very short, your country that you come from, and then we'll hand it over. Perhaps what you can do is just say, what was the most impactful thing that you've used that training for? It's on.
Hello, good afternoon. My name was Juma Kwame. I'm coming from Tanzania Network of People Using Drugs, Tanpud. And actually what I can say concerning the training that we had of the TOT, everybody's rights, everyone's rights, that was conducted by Sanpud, is that it had a great impact over my country, where I could have been, I've gone back, I took the message how to, with my community, CSOs, how we can prepare the different roadmap for the advocacy programs that we needed to advocate. Since in Tanzania, we got a lot more to push in the concern of people using drugs, but also for the LGBTI plus community, as previously been evidence a lot of crackdowns for the LGBTI community, which is also affecting for the people who are using drugs. And in that sense, what I can say as Tanpud, we don't want to leave anyone behind. We believe that all the key populations have to raise a voice for all of us. So, there being a lot of political statement, religious statement in terms of tradition or cultural issues concerning of the LGBTI community. But what we are doing on now on the ground, we are looking at avenues where we can advocate that to see these are human beings and that they have a concern as any human being they are having their human rights. And the problem is that people with drugs are, interchangeably in each every key population. You can find them in a sex worker, you can find them transgender, you can find them in the old LGBTI community. So when they affected the LGBTI plus communities, also the people in drugs also affected. So our way also for the ongoing issues is that we also we'll be able now also to have some legal scan project with input. This is to be coming up, and we believe that we'll be able to make a scan of the legal policies, laws, and they be able also to look at the targets which are the 60 targets, 10 targets, and see how be implemented in the countries, and see how as a standpoint can measure and make our government as an institution being committed to see that we meet these targets. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rita Musa from Nigeria. So I'm just going to go straight to your question. First, the beautiful thing about the Global TOT was that it brought African countries together, and we're able to compare or see similarities and gaps in our harm reduction and human rights services. It also gave us an opportunity to learn about the Global Fund criteria for funding, talking about the 2021-2026. And we also talked about the Global AIDS strategy, which was an eye-opener for most of us, the 10-10-10, the 30-60-80. That was something for me. With all of that, I was able to, within the short period, I was like July also, in a short time, I'm currently interim committee, steering committee of the key population in Nigeria. I was able to bring that to the table, and then we're able to develop a position paper for key populations in Nigeria, which will be presented at the AGM in September. Also, the network of people who use drugs, JAN, recently had the shadow reports where we're trying to see how we can get that into the UPR and, eventually have that presented also at the assemblies come end of the year, beginning of next year. The training was really enlightening. We had the advocacy session where we look at the problem tree, right? And then we had to design a roadmap. It was so enlightening. And then the most beautiful part for me, let me round up, is the Mentimeter. That really is something that every trainer needs to know how to use, because it helps you get qualitative and quantitative assessment of your trainees. It does it all for you. You get to know the impact you're making. You're able to measure what level of understanding. Like, it's so beautiful. So I'm going to just stop there.
Thank you so much. My name is Class 20, and I'm from the South African Network of People Who Use Drugs. Your question, Andrew, won't relate so much to me, but I will talk about the online drug decriminalizations that followed after the advocacy roadmap that Sanput was involved in, which is, I spoke about it in the session earlier, but yeah, due to time, we were kind of like rushed. I don't know how much time I have now, because I can take until... Yeah, so following the roadmap, the advocacy roadmap, so what happened was Sanput saw an opportunity to further expand the understanding and the knowledge related to drug decriminalization in South Africa, and we invited 25 participants from across South Africa in all provinces to participate in an online e-course that was developed or is still developed by IDPC. The course is still open, is free. Anyone can register and do the course, but then what we wanted to do was to contextualize it, bring it back to South Africa and make it understandable to our South African audience. So what happened after that, we had a 8-week reflection session where we invited those 25 participants, and we supported them to be able to access the e-course by providing some connectivity fee for them to be able to also attend the reflection session. And we invited also, in collaboration with IDPC, we invited Metal from the Fields of Green, we invited Sisonke, we invited, yes, we invited so many organizations. So we collaborated to make it work in South Africa and look at examples, like look at the road that Sisonke has gone so far to say, how can we learn from Sisonke decriminalization of sex work? How can we learn from other countries like Nigeria, where it was Maria who presented and like showed us the way, and yeah. So basically, that's what we did following the advocacy roadmap that was developed specifically for the South African audience.
So we've heard the use of the training and the skills to respond to crisis. We heard about the value of learning new skills, and also how we need to be innovative with using technology, contextualizing, and making things locally appropriate, and learning from our partners. So we'd like to now open it up to the audience for questions that you might have from either of our panelists, from their countries, their contexts, relating to the human rights training, to the decrim training, or anything that you've heard that you might want to ask them. So open it to the audience. Any questions? I don't know if there are any online. Did anyone send an online question? Someone did? Yes. Katlego? Please go ahead. Do you need a mic or just speak loudly? You're audible, yeah. Thank you.
So one thing that also between the learning and sharing that happens between us, Sisonke and Senput, was also the integration of the sex workers charter into one of the documents that they also can be able to utilize in making sure, because we all are fighting for the cause for decriminalization of both sectors. And again, I remember in a meeting yesterday, I spoke about it to say we should also look into how, therefore, we take drug usage and we align it with, the country's NSP in making sure also we consider TB, we consider STI, we consider HIV, and that can only be obtained through consultation by the people, so that it must be an NSP that's going to be owned by drug users. I thank you. Clap for me, guys. How?
Other comments, thoughts, reflections? Thank you. Any closing remarks from anyone of yourselves? Like maybe one 10-second, 20-second tip or recommendation you'd like to give people?
Okay, thank you very much. My closing remarks was, first of all, I say thank you very much for listening. And what I can say is that we have to, the first thing you have to look more on seeing how people using drugs, funding issues, that we being able, the networks and the CSOs able to have the funding to implement their projects, as we see from the 68 community-led response. For example, as in Tanzania, we can see there are very limited CSOs with community-led are implementing those projects for the NSP project, also for the OST projects. From almost 10 CSOs, only 2 community-led are implementing those projects. But we're still pushing and advocating for the government and other international implementation partners to see how they can increase the funding for the community-led organizations. Thank you.
So highlighting the importance of community-led service delivery.
Well, mine will be an appreciation to input and very many partners we've been working with for always creating these spaces. And I'd hope that it continues. More opportunities are being made for more advocacy work. So far, you hear networks in African countries giving reports on how they are able to assess their government, how they are able to take their advocacies far, to the top, to the people who need to who need this to be sensitized and then get all of this into the policies. So I just want to appreciate everybody and hope we keep doing this.
So it highlights a good return on investment. I think people have given very concrete examples of how they've actually in their countries made concrete differences. So a call for ongoing support. Thank you.
Yeah, mine is the emphasis on collaboration, because I've come to a realization that no one owns any space. For example, we as people who use drugs are we're in a process and we're still trying to formalize the sector for people who use drugs, and you realize that we need partners, we need collaboration, and we need to strengthen those and ensure that no one is left behind.
Yes, so they've said it all, but I would just say from a very grassroots perspective that putting people first is the most important thing for people who use drugs. It means that understanding that the personal will always be political, and that if we focus on just the advocacy and not all the other enablers that allow people who use drugs to be effective advocates, then we are just going round in circles. So putting people first and this the best platform for it. So thanks, Andrew.
Great. Thank you very much. Can we give a last round of applause to the panel? Yes. You were very eager to get off the stage. The last two people we'd like to invite, I think we have maybe heard them speak already during the course of the week, but if I could encourage them to come up. The first person is going to be Mr. Gunasekaran. We call him Guna Rengaswamy, who is the regional officer from UNODC, who's going to just give us some closing remarks, and also invite Angela McBride, who's the executive director of SANPUD. While they're getting up, we will give you an opportunity to speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to briefly give about some perspectives from UNODC side, what we do with the community-led organizations. So this is what I'm supposed to be speaking about. So some of them have been discussed much more, so I'll try to focus on the important ones that needs to be said again. UNODC promotes meaningful engagement with civil society organizations and community-led organizations across the globe. Since 2013, UNODC is supporting UNODC CSO group on drug use and HIV. So you can understand from at least 10 years back onwards that there is active engagement with regard to the civil society organizations group, which regularly meets. You can see one of these pictures there. That's exactly they are discussing around the Commission on Narcotic Drugs to give inputs. So this group became a very structured, group for giving, a proper support and collaboration, and also have, joint initiatives. Recently, UNODC has established a group for people who are working in prisons. We have around 39 grassroots level organizations, part of this prison civil society group. So input is represented in the CSO group already, and this group also consists of people from all geographic regions. And an annual plan is made every year, and this is implemented together with the civil society organizations. UNODC also supports input in the development of their activities and projects. So I had to mention this. I was having double minds whether to have this slide or not, but I thought it is important to keep it because UNODC earlier had civil society grants. In 2021 was the last time when we gave around 15 grants to different, civil society organizations. After that, due to funding shortfalls, I think this is temporarily on hold. Maybe when we are having resources to give, we would be able to, share that. This is one of the things that some of the speakers also highlighted, the difficulty with regard to, the availability of resources. It's a real serious issue. This I will not talk, and Andrew has given us, question and answers and education about it, so I just skip. Okay, so how UNODC really supports? UNODC supports scaling up community-led service delivery for people who use drugs. And UNODC values the unique expertise that community-led organizations and networks of people who use drugs bring and engages them in all aspects of the HIV response. So through the UNODC CSO group on drug use, UNODC involves community-led organizations in programming the work of the global HIV programs. So our work does not come on its own. It comes with participation from the civil society organizations' priorities. So we are also very particular about inclusion of community-led organizations in nationally led processes. Like sometimes including people as part of nationally led processes is very, very important. For example, recently we conducted a training here at the beginning of this drug policy week with the local drug abuse, substance abuse forum members. So we are trying to create a pool of people who can speak for themselves and also advocate for really joining the process of any funding opportunities, for example, the Global Fund community consultations or whatever that is possible. So this we try to help in the nationally led processes. So grants I spoke about, and we also continuously advocate for adequate resources allocation for sustainable community responses in all the forums possible. So, and another way that we always engage the civil society is in any of the UNODC trainings, capacity buildings, or anything, only the civil society with experience is coming there and giving their testimonials, talking about their experience and training people. This is across the board every time, and in all the trainings that we have done, and we will do also. And then we bring the civil society together annually every year. This Commission on Narcotic Drugs happens sometime around March every year. Around this time, we also bring all the civil society organizations to Vienna who are part of the civil society group to come together, talk about what are all the things that they want to put in or raise it at the CND sessions, They jointly make a statement and then present it to the CND. So CND, like in one of the sessions I said, is a policy-making body. So through all these conventions, so whatever we are saying will have some impact on what is going to be implemented in future. So that is something that's happening. Based on the UNODC technical guide developed jointly with UNAIDS and WHO, so on stimulant drugs, we are also providing national and regional trainings. One such training is going to be conducted day after tomorrow here in South Africa for around 30 participants from civil society organizations. So UNODC HIV/AIDS section has initiated the development of a 2-module e-learning tool on HIV prevention, treatment, and care for people who use stimulants. This is going to come up very shortly. And many of our colleagues and speakers here before spoke about the initiative of inputs, initiative of our rights, everybody's rights, and technical assistance module for drug user-led advocacy. This was supported by UNODC. So we were happy to be part of that very much. So out of the 10-10-10 targets, some of the 10s are getting more attention. Some of the 10s, for example, the 10 on punitive policies is getting some attention, stigma discrimination is getting some attention, and 110 does not get much attention is addressing gender equality and gender-based violence. We are coming out with a technical brief jointly with various civil society organizations, and this will be launched around the INSU conference in October 2023. And this is a hepatitis conference, conference among people who use substance coming up. So this is my last slide. We do quite a lot, as I mentioned before, we do quite a lot of activities. All of them involves civil society. And nothing is done on any organization's own ideas and things, but particularly I can assure you and I can tell you that we are very particular about really working and understanding from the ground and taking things forward. We trained, I'm not really giving a global picture or whatever since I live in South Africa. So recently, last year, we work a lot with Sandput, and Sandput was like a big pillar of support here. And through Sandput, we trained around 40 civil society organizations in Amajuba and Kwakwa. Recently, I was very happy to hear from, I do not know whether Ma'am Matuto is here from Department of Social Development. Okay. So she was mentioning that the government is planning to take this initiative forward, to take it to further more, advanced level trainings and all that. It's happy to know. Similarly, we did training for correctional service officers. In most of the times then when I spoke about the importance of involving people in prisons wherever we have programs in the community. We also would want to have them in the correctional services. So we did a OAT training through our dear friend Andrew very recently for correctional service officers in here. So that is there. And we are also organized. One another thing that has been proved to be very useful is learning visits. So we did one learning visit for senior management from the correctional services, and one for delegation along with Global Fund and South to South Learning Network and other colleagues. We really organized one for South Africa delegation going to Kenya. We have Rita here, and I think we met her there also during our visit, and one of our friends here is there. So many people there. So these are really proving to be very useful, and it changes a lot. So, and I mentioned about this substance use forums meeting that just happened recently, and we are organizing a CSO representatives, stimulants training, master training very soon, and we also have done recently some meetings to promote collaboration between civil society, government partners to bring together the focus of harm reduction in the country. And we also did an interdepartmental collaboration where also the civil society voice was very loudly heard and their views were respected. So this is something from my side I just wanted to share as something. I think together we can end the inequalities and end AIDS. Thank you very, very much.
So thank you. What we're going to do now, before we hand over to Angela for some closing remarks, could you put on the Mentimeter, please? We'd just like to get some feedback on the session. In a second it'll come on. Is it on? Great. So that is the QR code. This is a different one. Yeah, we've got to find a way of being more integrated. It's a good example of future integration. But we would just like you to take a minute to take a picture of that, and it's going to ask for your name, surname, and email address, because we would like, if you would want to be part of Sandput's mailing list, so they can share updates with you. Also, we'd like some feedback on how you found the session, and it'll also form as a reporting requirement for our donors. So please take a minute for that. And I see we have 3 questions. So before we hand over to, we'll give you a few more minutes to this, and then we'll check what questions were posed. Okay. Is everyone managing to send their feedback? Or do you need more time? So Elvis, can you, in the bottom right corner, there's that icon for the comment bars. Can you, on the right, far right? Yeah. If you click on that, so we'll see what questions were asked. So one of the questions is, what do we plan on doing for multi-key populations who need a cycle of care products due to both criminalization of sex work and drug use, but face both stigma for sexual preference and being displaced? Question around multiple intersectionalities there. Can we see the next question, please? I think if you press the down, will it allow you to? Maybe I need to. Oh, there we go. Then asked, is anyone having success with getting the private sector, such as local businesses, and the general population educated and involved? Is the wider public, the media, actively engaged as a stakeholder? So perhaps some of the panelists can just be thinking of who wants to make a response. Can we see the third question, please? And that is, underage people who use drugs and the access to health services at their places of residence, these being in informal settings and the limitation of reaching them, what can further be done to reach? So what can we do to reach young people in informal areas with services? Good questions. So would any one of the panelists like to give a perspective on any of those 3 items? One was around intersectionality and migration and mobility. The second one was around, forgot. Can we go up again? The third one is around underage or younger people who use drugs and informal settlements. Elvis, can you go to number 2, please? Oh yes, engaging the private sector and media. So anyone from Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania want to give their thoughts, responses? The panelists? No overstep. It's a safe space. As long as you've have you completed your feedback form? Okay. Okay.
So on engagement with the media, I think for us as the sex work sector, that has been a challenge over the years because in the media they'll always use these derogatory terms for sex workers and for people who use drugs. And when we try to engage with them and explaining that these are derogatory terms, can you please not use them in your publications? There's a certain newspaper that I hate, but I will not mention it because they consistently use this word. And the response that we've gotten is that, but this is what the public is saying about them. These are the words that the public use, so we have to speak to what the public is saying. But, the media has a lot of power in changing the way that the public speaks about us. And so that's been a challenge to say we need to get them on board for them to understand the power that they have in changing the narrative in the public. But they don't seem to want to take that responsibility from what we see.
Thank you very much for that insight. I think I'm just going to add a little bit more to that. I think that's very, very important to engage with media and media people. I would like to share a best practice that happened here, and hope Ma'am Nandi is here. So in March this year, we, UNODC with Central Drug Authority, we did a media engagement, inviting media to come and really understand about, how to really report on harm reduction issues. So I think, there was media, but not enough media at that time, So we have really decided to take it forward and do it again with, the initiative was actually initiated by Central Drug Authority. So I think this is a great thing, the government itself taking the responsibility to talk to people, who are reporting wrongly in the media is a great thing. So I thought this is an opportunity to acknowledge and share something is happening around that. Thank you.
One last comment, and then we're going to move to closing.
So I was just going to say, actually, Input has a great, do you think I need this? Yeah. Input has a great document which is all about language and terminology. So if you haven't seen that, go to their website and get that one, because we're also trying to get that disseminated to as many folks as possible. And then the only other thing is, a good example of engaging private sector would be Mauritius. So they tax all corporations, and all that money goes into a national fund, and then everyone can apply to the fund for funding for delivery of services. So it might be something to think about as we try and get more domestic financing.
So the publication is called Words Matter, a Language Guide. It's on the Input website. And like all training, all sensitization, once-off engagements don't work very well. So you have to have an ongoing engagement strategy. Also, there will be new people coming in, and also we need to remember it's not just the print media, it's online media, it's news media, etc. But that's really partners. We talked about more partners and collaborations, and I think the media to provide the correct messaging is really important. So just now handing over to Angela for the last words.
Hi, everybody. Like Colleen said on the opening, I'm not going to get in the way of lunch, but I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody, to our speakers, our panelists, Andrew, and also to Input HRI. It really is the perfect example of nothing for us without us. And we say quite proudly, working alongside HRI, UNODC, Input, it really is inclusive. It's not community-led monitoring, or it's not community-led tokenism, it's community-led monitoring, it's community-led involvement. We are people who use drugs, but we are people above everything else. So yeah, short and sweet. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, day.